The first time Bella Swan died, she didn't understand it. All she felt was the cold, the blood soaking her clothes, the unbearable pressure in her chest as her life faded into darkness. And then she woke up. The air smelled of rain and damp wood. The light in Forks was the same, the sky gray, the sound of students murmuring around her. Bella blinked, breathless, the memory of her death still fresh in her mind. She was in the cafeteria. Again, Jessica was talking to her, but Bella wasn't listening. Her gaze was locked on the table at the back of the room. On him. Edward Cullen. He hadn't looked at her yet. He hadn't seen her yet. But she knew what was going to happen. She knew that in the next few seconds, he would turn his head and see her for the first time. And so he did. Edward's eyes met hers, and Bella felt the crushing weight of déjà vu. Because she had lived this before, and not just once. Every time she died, she returned to this moment, always here, always with him. And no matter what she did, no matter how hard she tried to stay away, the story always repeated itself. It always ended with her death, and it always started over. At first, she tried to change it. She tried not to talk to Edward, not to sit near him, not to react when he looked at her with that unfathomable intensity. It didn't work. Edward always found a way into her life. Sometimes it was a chance encounter in the hallway. Sometimes it was a simple glance from across the parking lot. Sometimes it was as if he, too, could feel that they were trapped in a fate neither of them could control. But every attempt ended the same way. Death, darkness, reset. Sometimes it was an accident, a slip, a fall from an impossible height. Other times, something more sinister, a car crash, a strange vampire lurking in the night, a shadow in the woods, red eyes gleaming in the darkness. Once, it was even Edward himself. He hadn't meant to, but he had. Bella shuddered at the memory of his fangs sinking into her neck, the way his voice trembled with horror when he realized what he had done. It didn't matter how it ended. She always returned to the cafeteria, and every time she did, Edward seemed more dangerous. As if, with each reset, he was changing too. One day, Bella decided to confront him. She waited for him in the woods before he could reveal what he was, before he could save her from James, before everything could unfold the way it always did. When Edward appeared between the trees, his golden eyes glowing in the dim light, Bella felt her skin prickle. "I know what you are." Edward froze. "Bella," she held his gaze. "This isn't the first time we've been through this." Edward frowned. "What are you saying?" Bella felt her heart pounding. "I die, and I always come back here. I always meet you again. Always, everything starts over." Edward didn't speak, but his expression changed. It was just a flicker, an instant. But Bella saw it. It wasn't surprise, it was recognition. Bella felt a chill run down her spine. "Edward," her voice was barely a whisper. "Do you know what's happening?" He clenched his jaw. "Bella, you shouldn't." But before he could finish his sentence, a freezing sensation ran through her spine, the feeling that they weren't alone. And then, from the shadows of the trees, figures emerged. Black cloaks, crimson eyes. Bella felt her breath catch in her throat, the Volturi. Aro stepped forward with a soft, almost paternal smile. "Oh, dear child." His voice was a whisper full of delight. "You've awakened far sooner than expected." Bella felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, because deep in her mind, something remembered this encounter had happened before. Again and again. Every time she tried to escape, every time she tried to change fate, they were always there, manipulating the timeline, shaping it. Bella felt an overwhelming dizziness. She wasn't just trapped in a loop. She was part of their experiment, and this time she had woken up too soon. Aro tilted his head with a satisfied smile. "Let's see if this time you get further." And then everything went black. Bella woke up in the cafeteria. Jessica was talking to her. The air smelled of rain and damp wood. And at the back of the room, Edward Cullen lifted his head and looked at her. Again, but this time, Bella didn't feel fear. This time, she was ready. The air in the cafeteria felt heavier, more unreal. Bella blinked several times, trying to steady her breathing. Her heart pounded, but not from surprise, not from fear. Not this time. Because this time, she remembered everything. Jessica kept talking, repeating the same words as always, trapped in a reality only Bella seemed to notice. And across the room, Edward Cullen lifted his head and looked at her. Always the same. Always trapped. But this time, something in his eyes was different. Bella felt a shiver. Not because Edward looked at her as he always did, with that mix of attraction and conflict, but because he also seemed to remember. He froze for a second, too long, too charged, and then his expression changed. Edward blinked in disbelief, his body tensed, his gaze darkened. Bella felt her pulse race. He knew. Edward Cullen knew they were trapped in the loop, and if he knew, it meant he had always known. Bella clumsily stood up, not even hearing Jessica calling her name. She had to get out of there. She had to face him. She hurried toward the exit, feeling her skin prickle with every step. She didn't know how much time she had before the cycle reset again, before she died again. But then, just before she could reach the door, a cold hand closed around her wrist. Bella spun around. Edward was there, closer than ever, more real than ever. And in his eyes, the same desperation she felt. His voice was an icy whisper. "How much do you remember?" Bella swallowed hard. "Everything." Edward closed his eyes for a second, and when he opened them again, his expression was filled with something that wasn't relief. It was terror. "Bella," his voice shook, "you need to get out of here." But before she could move, the cafeteria door slammed shut with an impossible force. And then everything changed. The noise of the students faded, the air thickened as if time itself had slowed, and at the entrance, a figure in a black cloak appeared, a shadow among the mist. Bella felt her stomach drop. Aro. The leader of the Volturi smiled with unsettling calm, his crimson eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Ah, what a marvel!" His voice floated through the air like soft poison. "You have finally reached the end of the labyrinth." Bella's body tensed. "What did you do to me?" Aro tilted his head with feigned curiosity. "No, my dear child, the real question is, what have we done to you all the times before?" The world around her seemed to distort, as if the ground itself was bending beneath her feet. The cafeteria, the school, Forks itself, none of it was real. It never had been. Bella's memories exploded in her mind like a flood. Every death, every reset, every attempt to escape, all of it had been manipulated. Every time she got too far, every time Edward tried to defy the order of events, the Volturi reset the loop. It wasn't just an experiment. It was shaping her. "Why?" Bella whispered, her body trembling. Aro smiled. "Because we needed to perfect you." Bella felt a lump in her throat. "For what?" Aro took a step forward, his hands clasped together. "To make you into what you were always meant to be." Bella's breath caught in her chest. No, but Aro was already smiling. "Oh, my dear, have you never wondered why Edward was always unable to resist you? Why the story always led you both to the same ending?" Bella's pulse pounded in her skull. "Because we designed it that way." The revelation hit her like a blow to the stomach. "Edward never chose you." Aro tilted his head, his gaze dark with fascination. "He was created to love you, and you were created to be his destruction." The world shattered around her. Edward clenched his jaw, his body vibrating with rage. "You won't have her," Aro chuckled softly. "My dear Edward," his voice was a sharp whisper. "We have always had her." And then Bella felt the pull, not on her body, on her mind. As if something inside her had been activated. As if each of her deaths, each of her returns, every part of her story had been designed for this one moment. The loop wasn't a punishment, it was an incubation. Edward gripped her tightly. "Bella, you have to fight it." But deep down, she already knew the truth. She couldn't fight it. Because this wasn't a choice, it was her destiny. Reality fractured. One final reset, the last one. And when Bella woke up in the cafeteria, with the sound of rain tapping against the windows and Jessica's voice in her ears, Edward wasn't there. Not this time. Because the transformation was complete, and Bella had finally awakened.